Dear Newt Gingrich and Fox News. There are recorded wire crime action methods and mail crime action methods. And also that the agencies, foreign and domestic intelligence agencies, roles with criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, raw readings of statutes and precedents. And while roles of people speaking about the care for the Constitution anyway, they are clearer than day, high predators with the campuses, further with the retired police chiefs, an intimate tie. There's a person that was reportedly a former girlfriend of one of the former Wethersfield police chiefs involved with 80 Carriage Hill Drive and with the Smith family near them, involved with a whole bunch of people I don't know their names at Harvard Hospital. There's a Kevin Dillon too, untied to them, and people with the Parks and Recreation, further with some sexual and medical kids, offenders of kids. In other words, and each year they've been stacking predicate acts with facts and methods intercities because they brought the intercities up too. And these are people roles with the town lines through time, including Town Line Drive in Wethersfield, Connecticut. There are a bunch. There's a Joe DeMauro. There's a Mike Kerr. There are other police that recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. Also a Tony DeMauro. People from a whole bunch of different countries involved also with their educators with identity theft, frauds, and slanders. Has something to do with their roles all along Route 3 and its conjunctions to that, like the state judicial branch offices. Increasingly, the state judicial branch offices has roles with identity theft, fraud, slanders, and some black KKK Confederate flag theme that put fake things in databases. And they have roles with people on my street involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids, further with that principal upskirt nature, and with some untimely deaths and people tied to them. Increasingly, since I was a kid from other areas, that make confessions to me on my street and make it look like I even responded. I got him to respond and confirm what he said to me. Robert Rodriguez on Facebook, and they took my Facebook page because they were planting evidence on my street with him. I didn't respond to them the first time. Second time, I knew they were planting evidence with him other ways. So I never saw him on campus in my life. I never had a conversation with him in my life, except for on Facebook. But they changed the papers on Facebook. Harvard has collusions with former FBI before the whole Treasury attack. Before Facebook, they had roles putting fake things in databases. These are people involved with Facebook leaders. It might have been if there was a Celeste Wells. I never saw her inside of a campus in my life. I don't know her. All I know is she's involved with people that are increasingly involved with educators and kids that I never had classes with that put fake things in databases and try to make fake exceptions with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and people involved with the World Trade Center attack. And Eric Oliveri planted evidences, fake ties, fake natures of ties to me near the state judicial branch offices one time, making a fake exception. It has roles with also with Joe DeMauro, who spread lies about me with the people there too involved, and with Enzo Fienzo has roles with doing with them too there, and with people on 2 Route Highway, and with untimely death spots and body dumping spots, and other natures of organized crimes with kids that don't even know each other, and including with the kids when they make exceptions, they're using those kids as exceptions who have time collusions with all sides of criminal and civil cases, and courts at the same time recorded putting fake things in databases. There's a victim's advocate years ago associated with Connecticut's district court. I mean, with people with the Connecticut district court involved, but with the Connecticut's New Britain Superior Court, who has roles with overt criminal enterprises, plural, and private ones, and foreign and domestic military, and people on off the state judicial branch offices and conjunctions to it and conjunctions to that. These are people from Elm Street and Rocky Hill and Wethersfield, increasingly involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders with Wethersfield police, who confessed the name Kolovan involved. They brought this name up too. And people tied to the Smith family with some threats. In other words, I'm not the one bringing their names up. They're bringing it up too. They're lying about that in the backgrounds. And I think there are all kinds of mass evidence of racketeering worse than war crimes. The Britain Superior Court has been putting fake things in databases with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and proven child abusers leader the kids first forced years apart where they had time collusions with them with other natures of organized crimes. These are also people with abuses of the kids, of the leaders of the kids, and the kids and the other kids, and the difference of that exploited. These are not people capable of doing anything legitimately at A through Z because campuses A through Z are abridged. Forgiveness is so we can focus on the principles. Get them on paper, one name and sequence, please. And Newt Gingrich, think about that. All that's involved with those, like with that identity theft. Obviously, we can't. The law doesn't allow us to read we have to give them the deed to the house. In other words, there are other laws that you guys leave out exception nature, as being criminal insidious nature. Americans are being charged for things we shouldn't be charged for, while Americans, like in New York City especially, telling them get a job. Look at in other words, walk down that thing, walk down that big building in the background of rap videos, then go to school. And in other words, and when you're done, get a job. What job? All exception nature, are all criminal and serious natures of means to cause positive value nature, progressions, acts, and natures, and then to deny what the people are in. That's not success. Success is success is getting our Constitution unabridged and free. It's free speech. No one can defend themselves. I mean, anyone's logic who tries to pretend that science and honesty spoke for the sciences at any location. The suburbs were designed before America's founders were born. There were houses built. Slavery was entrenched in northern colonies, southern colonies. Other, in Wethersfield, Connecticut, other is communicated for James Madison, for our founders, plural, who told, I read, we were directed to refer to them, plural, as James Madison, singular. And his plan, they had to counter-extort George Washington. No one will even allow honesty about the extortion of George Washington. And while tactically delusions are all criminally foreign influence, not allowing people to use the hyper-evidential about Black people's rights of life, lying about their motivations to themselves and others, or just having it experienced through watching theater on television, which is changing through the ages because we're in a rat trap. And these are people changing they're lying about who speaks clear and who doesn't. And when they do, or who doesn't speak clear, when they're not speaking clear, they're lying, they're exploiting everything. And why they're not, in other words, because these are sequence shift cover-ups. All natures of investigators are have been used differently. Sometimes it's them as worse criminally foreign. Sometimes it's the difference of that is also manifest because the breaching method keeps that outcome. Because at the same time, equally increasingly worse. The difference of their collusion is also self-act as styles too, to keep styles. The breaching method keeps styles, needs, and natures. The nature forces as criminal and citizen natures of styles, pretending the Constitution's unabridged. Pretending the value of voting means what it doesn't. All we need to do is have our free speech. Get me off the paid conversations with the Britain Superior Court since I was a kid and get them out to paper, please. They switched names and made confessions regarding the police that also did that. Police forms intercities, too. These are ones involved before the World Trade Center attack with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin. Then they played games, intercities, and made it worse. And they're leaking this because you guys are going to have more leaked about it. I don't know what they're doing with Highland, Newt Gingrich, with like a John Mayano and people tied to Russians and Americans. And Wethersfield police said there's a name and their sources involved, some people involved with untimely deaths and predicate acts, and people involved with the World Trade Center attack. And with Saudi attackers that Wethersfield police Forced to them collusions also with the news and federal and former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, forced them to federal evidence crimes like some Mendez police. I never had a word of conversation with older Mendez police brother in my life. I only know his name through others. And it was, in other words, then he walked by smiling and made exception. It wasn't even in my grade. I never even saw him around campus, with one exception. His brother's increasingly involved with people out of the state judicial branch offices, too. Increasingly, people out of the state judicial branch offices have been roles with identity theft, fraud, slanders, which is also with black people's whites of eyes. These are some black KKK, Confederate flag theme, Latino theme, Italian theme that attached me to big conversations with Wethersfield police at the police station when I was a kid, too. As people increasingly involved with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and foreign and domestic medical families and their extended family members, also at corners of streets, right through wars. These are people putting fake transcripts in databases. These agencies, they can't defend their notions of, they just, most of the things they heard were only because the breaching method only allowed that to be principles. At locations A through Z, everywhere the human species body has a body standing. There are proofs. Nature shows us the more probable than what is theorized and convicted about the history that a hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded the phenomenon of people to defend the names of their countries as the phenomenon of locations, areas, and states that were simultaneously forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded to respond to bad things done to them, that they didn't know how to respond to it properly, what was causing it, what was motivating it, that they had to respond some way to stop it, just like with the fentanyl now, as reported. But so they did it, but then they did that wrong, but they defended it, simultaneously defending themselves further and further, incapable of affording to be, let alone to protract. Any individual defending short words properly, for example, regarding the order of the finite, details, exceptions, exception nature's value, special differences value. Black people, we are in a semi-ancient trap, /S, but the /S part, the plural part, are everyone, and denying it simultaneously. And the / part is the nature force. One of the things that nature gives us means to discern is that one of the things that witch trials is about. It's about the other crazy laws that at the same time that were entrenched. It's about how it had been sustained against Native Americans. It's how roles of that would be motivated because it had already been sustained against themselves since before modern religious messengers. The campus Marsyas of the republic for which we stand, and the pantheism science it relies on to make sure we are seeing and have seen through isms properly, and to be instead led by that which is hyper invisible but still discernible. For example, that which we know that shows us if the smallest finite detail is left out with the description of something or the grouped parts or the simultaneous is not conjunctive / hyperconjunctive to itself, its way. Itself being that identity of space / existence. That is not our species body, it's not those species bodies, but it's the one that has that manifest that way to show us its body, its identity of value progression. Its identity of value / value progression. As a trinity, as its nature is inseparable from where and how we could discern its individual part, its individual scientific value. It's only increasing value, that scientific value that we have to name. We're not supposed to agree on the name. Nature is showing us it is functional, how it is hyper invisible, distinctly from how it is invisible but still discernible. And this is what English and what the ancient in modern languages. Anything made up even is revealed to teach. The parts of speech of languages are about the invisible but still discernible. For example, subjects are have this too. Nature, we can only grapple with it with individual subjects and group subjects and simultaneous subjects to an extent. Slash S, but while being a quality of hyper relativity to itself further too. There is that distinct identity of simultaneous nature. That is not the finite, is not like the sequences. A sequence nature is like finite nature. A simultaneous nature is like a species body. But pupils, I forgot what I titled this video. Please, Newt Gingrich, and Fox News. WTNH has some FBI, has some intelligence involved also with the family members of the various natures of courts, with the same house directly involved with them, a whole bunch of people. And these are also people in the fake conversations they pretended through the mail to others about what they had with me. They pretend that I said everyone's evil. These are people involved with mass, all kinds of drugs and medicines, crimes and delusions, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, readings of reality, of American history. They are used as sense and sensibilities to sense for the breaching method. That and how replaced is what James Madison declassified for us to understand clearer than day. They didn't have free speech. There was a breaching method in forced roles. They had to counter-extort by forcing the people to break the crazy torture, extortion, slavery laws. And they have to hide from the overt criminal enterprises, private ones, terrorists, international companies, countries, their own countries. In other words, internationally monitored conversations were forced. I learned that in notes at Central Connecticut State University. Internationally monitored conversations had laws where it was even criminal to be found out listening to people speaking about building up infrastructure outside of internationally monitored conversation. Now, even if that was a joke, there was slavery in trans. It was not a joke. Even with way worse is entrenched. In other words, criminally foreign influence database relativity roles with a breaching method were entrenched. People pretending others simultaneously, even though other, forcing, them pretending about order and things like that. Or pretend we're about order. The parts of it, leaving out acceptance, as collusion /S. Forgiveness is so we don't leave out the breaching method, besides a whole bunch of reasons at once. Because everything's about that identity divide progression. That one that is true always, not leaving out the slave sequence and further positive onto itself. Or trying to be. Because it also cares. It wants our contemplation this way, our nature this way. Or it forces our special difference from here. As Earth's special difference as its own. It gains also positive onto itself, its system here, or it is forced from here. Because it is equal to positive and negative to all parts of space / existence. But then we have a concentrated special difference. But we have ignored it too long. The only reason we could do it for so long is because we are only one species body that has polluted the entire sea already. See the doctors on YouTube speaking about metals in the fish. People are getting metal poisoning from fish. Meanwhile, even the fresh water is polluted, even though we could just lift it up for better than free together and make it drop in beautiful ways. And the infrastructure The suburbs, they wanted to build better and safer. While they were being tortured, extorted, and enslaved, they still wanted, to an extent, they wanted to communicate that about the suburbs. But then America's founders were born. They themselves didn't have free speech. They still have their role. They also demonstrated for us to pay attention to how people are using and have used. See, you guys are victims who came through campuses the same. To have people, blame other things, others ourselves, for things that our founders told us to blame on the preaching method. They communicated through this to us. They declassified all this stuff about how there were laws. In other words, they had to counter-extort and force the rest of the founders. They had to break those crazy laws, and there's no justice when you even have their investigations would hurt and kill people. In other words, they're all fake. Everyone has to pretend to others simultaneously. They have torture methods, too many things at once, constantly on the people in the jail cells, too. Sandy Hook has a campus there, a jail that has roles with their patients and criminals, including campuses with security and medical, forcing child abusers, sexual and medical leaders of kids, with judges and prosecutors and their family members involved with the same house/S. Phil Cololo was increasingly one of the ones involved. Phil Cololo and Anthony Yagman, Joshua Julian, our online platform. Joshua Julian's also on YouTube, involved also with the Ray Cololo, with the Wethersfield Police, also on the Wethersfield Police, on the Facebook page of a principal upskirt nature, involved with other sexual and medical offenders at Hartford Hospital, also with the Leahy family that faked conversations with me through the mail to my mother. And I can't get a response from them, from Hartford Hospital. They increasingly have roles of people with intelligence at UConn and at New Britain, Central Connecticut State University. Something to do with the girl dragged to her death. And the FBI and the military's roles with a whole bunch of people like tied to a New Britain Superior Court, like Mark Violet and a Brian Silver, and to Connecticut's District Court, and people on off the, from the founding locations along Route 175, and from the judicial branch offices along Route 3 and its conjunctions. In conjunction to that, and which, in other words, also which goes by the state corrections offices, is increasingly involved with Washington, D.C. people and New York people, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with the ones on at the state corrections offices and the state judicial branch offices, having filmed fake exceptions, fake ties to me, as people collusions with all sides of criminal and civil cases, and their roles of multiple police departments. And their educators behind people's backs, repeating fake things into databases per a method/S. They have more people with Rocky Hill campuses and Wethersfield campuses and Hartford campuses and New Britain campuses, further involved with the courts, with sexual and medical offenders of kids, and the judicial branch offices and the corrections offices, with overt criminal enterprises and private ones at the same exact time. When I was a kid and I was an adult, now they're involved with terrorists too. That's also involved interstates and internationally with people named Scalora and DeMauro. That DeMauro and Cololo said they're related to a Scalora, and Wethersfield Police, and a Robert Rodriguez and others with the Wethersfield, with the sexual and untimely deaths collusions on off Trinity College, who made confessions on my street regarding their roles with that. And falsified police reports and murders roles with the people. I didn't tell them all that. These people were timing where I was going, making it look like I was part of their group, because these are the same houses involved with multiple police departments and campuses where they're just repeating fake things in the databases. They make it look like people say conversations. These are also crime methods that are still manifest that way. But the differences of the guilt is right where they're a victim, hyper victims, but blaming other things, others ourselves, exactly what the breaching method needs them to do, and maintains that the outcome/S. So before they have sick people, interstates, there were collusions at all locations/S, and then further with the databases relationships that we know about, and then further at the ones with the campuses of all ages and natures, including fire campuses and medical campuses, including increasingly fire campuses and medical families have been influenced, have roles within in foreign and domestic intelligence. There are proofs too because of their roles with energy generation. Because in other words, they've been using rights to lie where they don't have the right to lie, and pretending they could report anyway. But they've been, in other words, that's why WFSB has roles with this, in Rocky Hill, and Fox, Connecticut News, and Harper with the same people that are also involved with WTNH, putting identity theft, fraud, slanders with their sources. But I didn't call WTNH. I called Fox, Connecticut News, and WFSB. They want me to write them an email, but the police and the courts already changed the fake what's digitally recorded. Also with the FBI and intermilitary, interservices, Marines, Navy, etc., Air Force. There's a Paul Kelly with the Air Force, and his neighbors are further involved with WTNH, with people at the corner of the street, with kids and adults involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, with the news at the same time, with the interbranch forcing child abusers and putting like a harassment charge with no writing so they can cover up what's actually recorded. They fear God now. Fear God now. In other words, till we get the free speech. There's a difference of guilt too. These are people involved with overt criminal enterprise, private ones. Increasingly at the corners and next to the campuses, they're acting per the intelligence, influencing other people to take pictures, to book fake ties, fake natures of ties to people. In other words, I only know about Subby Bajerio sought me out to confess, demonstrate, record, confirm that. David Show needs to pretend other behind my back. He's increasingly involved with people on all sides of Central Connecticut State University in the Britain, Connecticut, involved with people on my street with him, intercities, involved with sexual medical offenders, has something to do with their roles with the Wethersfield Community Center on all sides of it, with a Dillon family, and people that have been planting evidence on all sides of my house too. Dear God, get them on paper, one name in sequence. There's violence involved. Judge Napolitano, I've been asking him online because they're already using wired crime acts and methods, including fake phone transcripts, changed ones. Get them on paper, one name in sequence, please. The rest proceeds. Lisa IDs. Who disbelieves? We need the Who Disbelieves Act, and we need the ACE Act, the anti-hyperarchetype